Hey Geekies, welcome to day one of Winter Emus. I am so excited for these celebrations to kick off. This year, just like last year, we've got a bunch of content creators joining us, answering questions. But this year, unlike last where we were asking about the game genres, we've got some questions dedicated to games and the consoles themselves. This episode, we're asking the question, what is your favorite retro console? So, sit back, relax, and let's get geeky.
Welcome one and all to the Geeky N8 Show with your host Geeky N8. Buckle up, it's going to be fun.
What's up, nerdlings?
What up, nerdlings?
Tom and Lacey of Do You Nerd, and I would like to extend a huge shout out and thank you to Geeky N8 for asking us and having us aboard this little collab. We've got some fun gaming questions to try to answer. Okay, first of all, favorite retro console. I'm going to take the lead here and say for me, Super Nintendo. Come on! It's everything that Nintendo was, but super. Seriously, that 16-bit system was amazing. It does have my favorite Mario game of all time with Super Mario World. It's got my favorite Zelda game of all time with Link to the Past. And oh, the RPGs. 16-bit JRPG goodness all of the way. So many of those games still look, sound, and play great to this day. How can I not go with that as my favorite retro console? What about you, my dear? Your favorite retro console?
Well, we had, a few. We had the Atari, the Nintendo, the Genesis. I would probably say maybe the regular Nintendo, simply because I was fascinated by the crooked door. I absolutely love that. I remember the first time I ever saw one was at a friend's house down the street, and I didn't even pay attention to what game he was playing. I was just opening and closing that little door because who has a door that does this? I mean, that's just weird. And so I asked my parents for one strictly on a door.
Ladies and gentlemen, the doors.
While the PlayStation 1 has a pretty big library and a lot of great games, the PlayStation 2 has a gigantic library, and among those games are some of my favourite, and I think that the amount of great games on the PS2 trumps any other console. That's why it's my favourite retro console. In terms of visuals, I don't think we've ever seen a bigger gap than we have when looking at the difference between PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2's graphics. There are games that to this day I think still look amazing, games like Silent Hill and Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3. I actually find that the PlayStation 2 has some real hidden gems when it comes to JRPGs that have such unique worlds, characters, and gameplay as well.
My favorite retro console, it has to be the Nintendo Wii, and that mainly because what I remember at the time of it coming out, it was the first big console that I remember getting excited for, and when having it, I would have blown away by it.
Hey, what is up, you guys? This is Los from the Big Retro Show, and a big thank you to Nate for having me on today's episode. Now, I'm going to be answering some questions that Nate asked me about video games, our favorite thing, right? So, the first question. My favorite retro console has to be the Nintendo Entertainment System, and that's simply because of the great library of games that the Nintendo has. Now, on the Nintendo Entertainment System, the best game that I think the system has is Super Mario Bros. 3. It's my favorite game. It is a classic. Who can forget the memorable experience that everyone had playing this game, especially when you got to use the Tanuki suit and the frog suit and all of the raccoon tails that were sprinkled throughout the world. This game was something special. The very first time that I saw this game was actually in the movie starring Fred Savage, The Wizard, and I was hooked with it. That is my very favorite Nintendo game. And it's my very favorite console as well. You have to remember that during the 80s, there was a video game crash that began with the Atari 2600 release of E.T. Now, everybody likes to bag on E.T., but I actually like the game, and that's a different story. But anyways, that game single-handedly caused the video game crash of the 80s, and it was the Nintendo Entertainment System that brought it back. It brought video games back. All of a sudden, we started seeing video game commercials on TV. We saw Rob the Robot, we saw Gyromite, we saw Excitebike, and who can forget seeing commercials with Super Mario Brothers in them? That was a joy for us as kids. This was a system that did away with the stigma that video games had, that proved that video games could be marketable, and they were the hot toy to have during the 80s when the Nintendo released. So yes, my favorite retro console, is the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sega Head, and it is my turn to answer the questions that Geeky N8 has thrown my way. Now, the first question is, what is my favourite retro video game console of all time? Well, gee, I wonder. It's the Master System. Now, there are many reasons why the Master System is the greatest console ever, in my opinion. There's one, it's Sega. 2, it simply is the greatest console ever created. 3, it was the first console I ever had. My nostalgia for it is bleeding out of every orifice on this body, which is a disgusting thought. So savour that, enjoy it. The next reason is a simple fact that it is the greatest console ever created. Other than that, what else? Oh yeah, it looks like sex made out of plastic. It's just awesome. Next reason is, it's the greatest console ever created. Ever getting that feeling of deja vu? And I just gotta say, as the final thing for why I love that console so much, is Sega fans love Sega because Sega was the underdog. There is nothing more fucking underdog from Sega than the Master System. That's just simple truth on that.
Hello everyone. My favorite retro console would have to be the Super Nintendo. This was the console I started out with, and it had some of the most iconic games we know today. I mean, hell, they're even throwing SNES games on the Switch. I admire the Super Nintendo because I think its lifetime was pretty much perfect. It wasn't so long that it outlived its creativity, but it wasn't so short that you had to succumb to console madness where a new console is here before they perfect the last console's art. The SNES had some of the most complete and polished games even today.
The Nintendo 64 is definitely my favourite retro console. It's not the first console I had. The first console I had was a Mega Drive, and I love Sonic, I love Gain Ground, I love Golden Axe, I love that era of gaming, but something about the N64 appealed more to me. I think it was the first time where I kind of played a game and thought, wow, this is incredible. Like, actually incredible. It took my breath away as a kid and captured my imagination more than anything had done before. The N64 was the era that showed me what video games could be. Mario 64, GoldenEye, Ocarina of Time, Banjo-Kazooie. They were all the games that kind of made me into the gamer I am today, I think. That was the era that really kind of got me into gaming.
So when talking about retro console, to me, that's generations before the generation of the PlayStation, Sega Saturn, the Nintendo 64. Before that, before those consoles, so we're talking about 16-bit gen and backwards. So you may have guessed that my favorite console may be a Sega console because I've got on this jersey, as I'm not a fan of Arsenal or football in general. However, it is actually the Super Nintendo. It's been my favorite console since it was released, to be honest, I guess, actually, now that I'm thinking of it. It has many of my favorite games, including my favorite game of all time, which we'll get to later on in the week. Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Pilot Wings, Kirby's Dream Course, the original Star Fox, Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario RPG, Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana. So many RPGs. If you're an RPG lover, That's the system. In my opinion, only the PlayStation 1 would even come close to the library of RPGs that the Super Nintendo seems to have. There are even a lot of great RPGs that didn't come stateside. Like, I'm pretty sure there's an RPG of Sailor Moon. There's all kinds of import titles that didn't come over to the West based on anime titles, and just lots of different RPG series that didn't even get released here because I guess they didn't sell as well in the States at that time. NBA Jam, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter 2. I would really consider those arcade games, but basically I love the music, I love the graphical art style, I really dig that 16-bit sprite look, I like Mode 7, or whatever it's called, the Pilot Wing style. Yeah, it's all around my favorite pick, and when they announced Nintendo Switch was going to have access to that library and that you could play some of those titles online, it just made that system even more appealing to me, which I already held high regards for, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Love it, love everything about it. I wish they still released games for it. I'd like to see another Zelda title officially done in Super Nintendo style, like Link to the Past. But yeah.
Hey, so what is our favorite retro console? Well, this is a very, very hard question to answer, and I think before we actually answer it, we need to set some new parameters, and I'm wanting to propose a new group of consoles. So I'm going to propose here that we set retro consoles to be the first 6 generations. Classic consoles are from Gen 7 to the previous generation of whatever is our modern consoles. Why do I propose this? Well, I think we're at a point now where, you know, we've had games since the games console since the 70s. That's a huge period of time. Huge period of time. And as it's really hard to think of the Wii and the Wii U or the 360 as retro consoles. So and the PS3 in that collection. So I think they should be called classics. And we should have the retro consoles for your NES, your SNES, your Mega Drive, your Master Systems, your Sega Saturns, your GameCubes, your Dreamcast. Those are retro in my mind. So that sets some parameters. Okay, so we're not going to go past the GameCube in our retro considerations. So then, what is our favorite retro console? Well, you know, the SNES had some great games. It had one of our favorite games with A Link to the Past. The NES had great games. We spent all our time playing Mario Brothers 3, and the N64, bunch of great games. The Mega Drive, a bunch of great games. It's hard to choose, but I think after I've considered the console I keep going back to, the one that I go back to every year, is the N64. As such, the N64 will be our favorite retro console, and I know a lot of people have a grind about it, especially with the controller. But the thing is, this controller isn't anywhere near as complicated as people feel. I know when you look at it, it's like, oh, how are you meant to play that? But tell me, how many games you ever played on the N64 that needed both the D-pad and the stick? I'm going to say none. And so it became very easy on how to hold this. Always your right hand is on these ones because you're always using these buttons and you're using that shoulder button. Then you had the Z button and this. And the truth is, this is how you played most of the time. It was a rare occasion that you needed to hop over to hit that button in any game. And you definitely didn't ever have to reach over to do this. Now, there were some games that were just D-pad only, and yeah, then you were playing like this. And that made sense too. So for me, I don't think this controller is anywhere near as complicated as it looks. No game that I can remember needed you to have use of all parts of the controller. Please let me know in the comments below, though, if there was one like it, because I'd like to check that out, but not from my memory. Not at all. Okay, maybe Smash Bros. with the taunts you would reach over, but let's be honest, that's not a core mechanic, and we didn't really use it. Well, I say we didn't really use it. Actually, I used it all the time with Kirby, because Kirby's taunts were hilarious. But anyway, that's off subject. Yeah, so N64 is our favourite console in the retro grouping that we have just defined. So that about wraps up day one of Winter Emus. What was your favourite answer? And what is your answer to what is your favourite retro console? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you to everybody that joined us in today's episode. You can find links to their channels in the description below. Go check them out. Make sure you subscribe to them if you like what they're doing. And if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to keep up to date with our episodes. We have a new episode coming out every day this week for the whole of Winter Emus, with everyone returning, apart from sadly Scrampy, who was able to give us their answer to this episode, and then been unfortunately unable to commit to doing the rest due to their own life commitments and episode commitments, which is perfectly fine, but definitely go check them out. They have a great channel. So yes, we'll see you all at 10 PM tonight when we're streaming Glow from Chronic Spartan Gaming, and also Brawlhalla, which we'll be playing with you, the viewers. And keep an eye out for tomorrow's episode when that one drops. Until next time, keep it geeky.
Keep it geeky.